We just got down from Lot's Cave. It's up that way. Here it is over here, where there's a church that was built about 605 AD, so about 2,500 years after Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah and that whole story from Genesis 19. You know, a lot of people, if they keep reading in Genesis 19, they're going to see that Lot's daughter said, hey, there's no men around to give us a child, so let's get our father Lot drunk, probably up in that cave, so we could sleep with him and have kids. And actually, that's exactly what happened. And a lot of people go, oh, the Bible, what an awful book. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there's a difference between a prescription and a description. And the Bible is just describing what happened. Yeah, it's terrible, but it's telling you the terrible truth, because that's how human beings are. We're fallen. We need a savior. It's not sugarcoating everything. It's another example of an embarrassing detail about God's own people. Why would they record such a thing? Because it really happened. They're not sugarcoating that Lot's daughters got him drunk and slept with him so they could have kids, much like the same kind of thing happened with Noah. They're not sugarcoating their supposed heroes. In fact, Dennis Prager famously said, one of the reasons I know the Old Testament is true, because no people group would ever invent such an embarrassing history of themselves. And that's true. Dennis has it right. Embarrassing testimony is evidence they're telling the truth. But I would ask Dennis, if embarrassing details and stories is evidence for the truth of the Old Testament, why isn't it evidence for the truth of the New? I think it is. You know, there's a lot of embarrassing stories in the New. Like, for example, Peter is called Satan by the leader, Jesus.
That's the founder of the church.
Yeah.
Or that's the head of the church.
Yeah, he's the head of the church. He's called Satan, and he says, Lord, I'll never deny you. What does he wind up doing? Denying him 3 times. And then they all run away at the crucifixion, with the exception of one. And then the women are the first witnesses. Who's going to invent that? Women's testimony was not considered on par with that of a man at that time. They would never say that. And they would never say one of their key witnesses was a formerly demon-possessed woman, Mary Magdalene. This is not invented. They wouldn't invent that Jesus was called a drunkard, or that Jesus was called a madman, or that Jesus was called demon-possessed. They wouldn't invent these things. They're just telling the truth. So from Lot up there being seduced by his daughters after he was drunk, to the embarrassing things going on throughout the Old Testament, they can continually, after repeated warnings, sin against Yahweh, and they keep getting judged, to the New Testament, where the scared, scattered, skeptical disciples who do one bone-headed thing after another finally get some courage after he's risen from the dead. All of that shows this is not an invented story. It's not made up. You can trust it.